Hello, everybody. I just want to welcome you now to our liturgy here on this Memorial Day weekend. As much as we're wrapped up concerned about the pandemic that we're all suffering from and anxious about, understandably so, Memorial Day, though, also makes us stop and pause and to remember something perhaps even more grave, those who lost their lives in the many wars that we have faced as a nation for our freedom and the freedoms of other people. So much as we may be, inconvenienced, some of us, more so. I know it's a terrible struggle, but let's remember those who lost their lives. And speak a little bit about Memorial Day. We invite Michael, who has a great love for our nation, who's very patriotic, and if you come to the 7:30 Mass, he's the outstanding usher. So Michael was in the Coast Guard, proudly so. And anyway, let's hear Mike say a few words for us on this Memorial Day weekend. Michael, please.
Thank you, Father. May 14th, we honored those who are serving in the military right now. We call that Armed Forces Day. In November, on the 11th, we will celebrate Veterans Day to remember those who have served our country in all the services. But the 25th of May is Memorial Day, a day that is set aside by our government to recognize the sacrifice of men and women throughout the history of this great nation. Memorial Day, or as it is known in the British Empire, Remembrance Day, is signified by the poppy, made popular by the poem In Flanders Field, Flanders being a region of Belgium. This poem was done during World War I. Memorial Day, a day upon which we honor those who gave their lives in order to save those with whom they served. It's not about cookouts. It's not about going to the beach. It's not about the next mattress sale. It's a somber remembrance of the sacrifice of those men and women. John chapter 15, verse 13 says, "No greater love than this, to lay down his life for one's friends." One of the forerunners of the modern-day Coast Guard, the United States Life-Saving Service, had this motto: "You have to go out. You don't have to come back," which truly epitomizes the sacrifice these men would make to save lives of their friends. Let me tell you of four men who embody the ideal of sacrifice. Signalman First Class Douglas Doug Monroe, Boatswain Mate First Class Edgar Ed Culbertson, Seaman Apprentice William Bill Flores, and Damage Controlman Third Class Petty Officer Nathaniel Nate Bruckenthal. Guadalcanal, 1942. Lieutenant Marine Colonel Chesty Puller had ordered 3 companies of Marines to attack the flank of the Japanese positions on the west side of Mataniku River. Monroe was in charge of 2 landing craft tanks and 8 Higgins boats, small personal landing crafts. Tasked with transporting the Marines to the landing points, preceded by a beach-clearing ship-to-shore bombardment by the destroyer USS Monson. These forces landed. Immediately, they came under a fierce counterattack by the Japanese army. And Chesty Puller said, "Let's get them off that beach." At Lunga Point, the landing craft were instructed to return and extract the besieged Marines. Commander Dexter asked Monroe and Evans if they would take charge of the mission, to which Doug answered, "Hell yes." As the boat on Monroe's charge approached the recovery point, they came under heavy fire from Japanese forces on the ridge abandoned by the Marines earlier. Doug, using a .30 caliber machine gun on the Higgins boat, maneuvered his landing craft to direct suppressing fire against the Japanese and also as a shield for the disembarking Marines. Through the initial extraction was successful, one of the LCTs became grounded on the sandbar. Doug directed the other LCT to help extricate the grounded vessel as he maneuvered his own boat to once again shield the Marines from Japanese fire from the shore. Doug was shot in the base of the skull and lost consciousness. The LCT was ultimately freed, and the boats resumed their withdrawal. When out of range of Japanese forces, Monroe regained briefly consciousness before succumbing to his wounds. According to Evans, his dying words were, "Did they get off?" Evans said later that, seeing my affirmative nod, he smiled with that smile that I knew so well, and then he was gone. For this, Douglas Monroe was awarded the Medal of Honor, the only Coast Guardman ever and to have yet received. April 67, Lake Superior. BM-1 Edgar Ed Culbertson gave his life attempting to rescue 3 boys in Duluth, Minnesota. Along with 2 other members of Station Duluth, he volunteered to venture out onto the North Pier at Duluth to the rescue of the 3 boys who had been reported out playing on the pier during a severe storm. Witnesses had seen a wave wash one of the boys away, but the 2 others were apparently trapped near the lighthouse. Culbertson's Coast Guard medal citation noted, lashing themselves together at 25-foot intervals, the 3 men proceeded with hand lanterns as the only illumination to the end of the breakwater. Despite the high waves, winds gusting to 40 knots, driving rain, and 36-degree water temperatures, the 3 men proceeded. And they diligently searched the breakwater and light, but found no trace of the boys. While returning to the beach, a 20-foot wave swept Petty Officer Culbertson off his feet and hurled him up and over the breakwater into the chilly waters of Lake Superior. Despite the strenuous efforts of his teammates, Ed perished in his gallant rescue attempt. He was posthumously awarded the Coast Guard Medal. The Coast Guard Medal is the highest ranking medal received in peacetime by any Coast Guardsman. The other 2 coasters, BM-2 Richard Callahan and Fireman Ronald C. Prey, were also awarded the Coast Guard Medal. Fast forward to Tampa Bay, January 1980. Seaman apprentice Bill Flores was cited for heroism on the evening of January 28th while serving aboard the Coast Guard cutter Blackthorn. Think of this. Here's a brand new seaman apprentice, just finished boot camp, 2 weeks home, visiting friends and family, brand new reporting on board. Upon exiting Tampa Bay under the Skyway Bridge, the Blackthorn was collided with the SS Capricorn. It was rolled to port and capsized before the ship's personnel could prepare an orderly abandoned ship. Exhibiting composure beyond his shipboard experience, he knew 3 things: where his rack was, where he could get a meal, where he had to go to work. Seaman apprentice Flores joined another Blackthorn crew member in making their way to the starboard life jacket locker and commenced throwing life jackets over the side to fellow crew members already in the water. Later, as Blackthorn began to submerge and his companions abandoned ship, Bill remained aboard to strap the life jacket locker open with his own belt, and thereby contributing to the survival of struggling crew members who retrieved life jackets as they floated free to the surface. Even as most crew members had already abandoned ship, Flores, with complete disregard of his own safety, remained on the inverted hull to assist trapped crew members and provide aid and comfort to injured and disoriented shipmates. His exceptional fortitude, remarkable initiative, and courage throughout the entire tragic incident were instrumental in saving many lives and resulted in the sacrifice of his own. Seaman apprentice Flores' courage, selflessness, and devotion to duty are most heartily commended and are in keeping with the highest traditions of the U.S. Coast Guard. He received for his actions the Coast Guard gold medal. April 2004, the Persian Gulf. DC-3 Nate Bruckenthal was a leader on a TACLET, which is a Tactical Action Law Enforcement Team. His task that day was to train U.S. Navy personnel on proper boarding procedures. The U.S. Navy cannot make a boarding on board a ship in international waters. It's considered an act of piracy. You put one coastie on that team, it becomes a law enforcement team. They were securing the perimeter on the oil terminals, which they knew would be likely targets for attack. Initially, 10 dhows, Arab fishing vessels, approached but were turned away by the presence of the U.S. Navy. As they continued their patrol, Bruckenthal noticed one small dhow that hadn't heeded the initial warning. The lone ship was still headed towards the terminal, ignoring all orders and threats. Bruckenthal had his RHIB, rigid hull inflatable boat, pull up alongside the dhow when all hell broke loose. The Iraqis on board must have realized that the game was up and they were about to be boarded. In their terrified state, they detonated the explosives on board in the cargo hold. The massive blast destroyed the dhow and sent a wave of shrapnel towards the RHI. Bruckenthal was the closest to the ship and took the brunt of the debris, while the boat flipped over, throwing his crew into the water. Thanks to the early warning, the terminals were able to open fire on the other two dhows laden with explosives just in time. While both detonated the bombs, minimal damage, resulting in only 3 or 4 days of lost production rather than the destruction of the terminals. DC-3 Nate Bruckenthal died of his wounds later that day, and that so far, the first and only so far, Coast Guard combat casualty since the Vietnam War. For his bravery and self-sacrifice, he was awarded the Bronze Star with Combat Distinguishing Device and the Purple Heart. These 4 men, and countless others like them, like Lieutenant Colleen Kane, the first female ever to become a qualified helo pilot. This happened on June 8th of 1979. Unfortunately, less than 2.5 years later, Lieutenant Kane lost her life in a rescue mission off of Molokai. These have gone through into harm's way with no thought of their own safety, truly embracing the core values of the U.S. Coast Guard: honor, respect, and devotion to duty. I stand before you today to honor them and all who have given their lives in the line of duty during times of war and peace. I close with the recitation of the words to a song that many hear but never sing. The notes, whether sounded by a single bugle, a pair of trumpets, or a recording at a military funeral, are hauntingly familiar and moving. Taps. Day is done, gone the sun, from the hills, from the lake, from the skies. All is well, safely rest, God is nigh. Go to sleep, peaceful sleep, may the soldier or sailor our God keep, on the land or o'er the deep, safe in sleep. Love, good night, must thou go, when the day and the night need thee so? All is well, speedeth all to their rest. Fades the light, and afar goeth day, and the star shineth bright. Fare thee well, day has gone, night is on. Thanks and praise for our days, neath the sun, neath the stars, neath the sky. As we go, this we know, God is nigh. Thank you.